All right, and away we go. So welcome everybody to today's session. My name is Josh Brothheim. I am a technical trainer based out of Portland, Oregon, in the United States. And it's 9:30 p.m. for me. And thank you for having me. So we're going to be together for the next 2 days. And what we're going to be doing today is our fundamentals class. So today we're going to go over the fundamentals of Sumo Logic and what that is, and we'll get into those details shortly. I have two peers who are assisting me today. So Suresh and Ashutosh are handling the chat. So if there's any questions during today's session, just go ahead and put them in the chat, and those guys will help answer them. And let's start here. So wanted to set forth the agenda for today. As mentioned, we'll be together for the next 3 hours. And so the first 2 hours of today are going to be devoted to labs, content, slides, really learning material. The last hour is going to be set aside for an exam. And what you're going to have the opportunity to do is take a free fundamentals exam that's going to allow you to take a multiple choice exam to show that you are certified. And so we'll talk about those details a little bit later. I don't want you to get worried or stressed out about the exam. We're going to make it easy for you. I'll get into those details later, but don't get too worried. So the schedule or the plan is to give a bit of an overview of Sumo Logic, which I'm going to start to do in a moment. And then I'm going to do a little demo, and I'm going to show you some monitoring and troubleshooting use case that is a good example of using Sumo Logic. And then we're going to do some hands-on labs. So together we're going to log into our training environment, and I'll give you those credentials later. And we'll go ahead and start to explore Sumo Logic and do some things in it. Do some querying and doing some searching, seeing what data has been collected, looking at creating alerts and dashboards and all important things that a basic Sumo Logic user should understand. And then once again, we'll have that 60 minutes devoted to that exam later. And so that's kind of the game plan. So for the schedule, we'll be together for the next 2 hours in training. We'll probably take a break in about an hour or so just to get up and stretch. Then we'll come back, we'll do some more labs, and then you'll take that exam. So that's the game plan. Once again, any questions throughout the evening or the day, rather, morning, go ahead and put them in the chat, and both my guys will help out. All right, so what I want to do first is just give a little overview of Sumo Logic. You might be brand new to Sumo, you may not be. I'm going to assume you actually are kind of new to Sumo just based on the audience here. But either way, you're going to learn something today. What I wanted to first talk about is Sumo Logic, the continuous intelligence platform that we offer. It's sometimes referred to as SIP, Sumo Logic SIP, CIP, so you might hear that acronym. And what it's referring to is our legacy or traditional Sumo Logic environment. And with that environment, you have the ability to utilize the logs and metrics or whatever data you ingest and pull value from that data. And so you might be able to, or might want to look at your data from an operational intelligence standpoint. You might want to look at your data from a security intelligence standpoint, maybe understanding who is logging in, when are they logging in, are they logging in multiple times? Business intelligence data, maybe understanding your how many items were ordered, what time period were they ordered in, is there a trend of people ordering products during a certain period of time? That's certainly quite useful from a business standpoint. And then global intelligence is helping you understand your data from a worldwide view. And so those are all essentially the same tool of Sumo Logic, just using it for different use cases. And there's more use cases than just these 4 that I've listed. Now, within Sumo Logic, your data is going to be critical. Without your data, Sumo Logic can't really do much. It needs your data to function for you to start to utilize Sumo Logic against your data. And your data could come in a variety of different formats and from a variety of different sources. Your data might be data that's generated in a cloud environment, like an AWS, a cloud system. It might be data that's being generated by microservices. It might be data that's being generated by legacy servers, bare bones servers, a server farm, third-party data, many sources of data are going to be generated, and your data resides in many different environments or different places probably. And so what you're going to want to do is bring your data into Sumo Logic. I'm going to talk about that in more detail in a few moments, but your data is critical to the success of Sumo Logic. Now, once your data is in Sumo Logic, or is in Sumo Logic, excuse me, then you can start to utilize our analytics against it. Sumo Logic has multi-tenancy, it's scalable, it's elastic, there's machine learning that's built into it. API usage, although we're not really going to do much with APIs. Advanced analytics, security and monitoring, these are all built-in functionality or functionality within Sumo Logic, and things that you can take advantage of to look at your data. On the right-hand side of the screen here, we're showing some of our certifications and attestations that we've accomplished. Many of them are probably US centric, but all quite important to show that we're security tested and proven. And so those are quite important. And then the last portion of this slide is just reminding you of who can benefit from Sumo Logic. Well, fortunately, everybody can. Maybe it's your DevOps people, maybe engineering, customer success can use Sumo Logic, and all these different roles. And so we're certainly going to show you how some of those roles might use Sumo Logic shortly. And what I want to do now is actually get into a demo. So let me get out of this slide and let me, get right here. Now, for this example, I want you to imagine that we have another company that's a sister company called Travel Logic. And Travel Logic is a online travel booking website. And so it's going to allow you to book your holidays and hotels and car rentals. And you may have used sites like that before. I'm sure we have. And for this example, we want to assume that Travel Logic is a production environment. So what's happening right now is people are coming to Travel Logic and booking hotels and booking rental cars and booking holidays. And we get a percentage of each ticket that's booked. And business is good. People are booking tickets, booking hotels, booking vacations, and we get a percentage, and things are fine. Things are good. Now, something good or something bad is now going to happen. And in this example, I want you to imagine, actually, I think I can even show you an example of it real quickly, let me show it, sorry. I get a Slack message. And my Slack message says, Sumo Logic alert, gateway response time outlier, prod 09. Now, hopefully I know what this is, but what I can do is navigate into this message. As you see here with the Slack message, I can go ahead and start to look at the operational overview. So by clicking on the operational overview, now I'm brought into Sumo Logic, and now I'm starting to look at these panels in our dashboard. Now, I showed you that Slack message I got, but I also want to add another piece to the story. And the piece I want to add is I want you to imagine that my manager has called me up, and my manager has told me that people are having a problem checking out of the Travel Logic website, meaning they're not able to book their hotels and their airfare and their holidays successfully. We don't know why, but they're getting errors. And that's a problem, because if they can't book their hotels and holidays, we don't get money and they don't get a good customer experience. And that's bad, of course. And so we want to prevent that. So how can we use Sumo Logic to start to dig into the fact that people may not be able to check out? How do we confirm that? And how do we fix that? That seems like a lot to do. Well, let's take a look at how we can do that. So what I've gone into here is an operational overview dashboard. This might be something I created. It might be something that somebody else in my organization has created. But what they've created is a dashboard with a bunch of different panels. Hopefully I know what these panels mean, because it's my job to look at these. But even if I don't, we're using a very simple color scheme. Green, good; red, bad; orange, kind of in between. And so I have all these different things up here. I have a reporting node. I have load balancers. I have VPC networks. Once again, hopefully I know what they are, but even if I don't, this is green, so that's kind of good. This is green, kind of good. But what I see in the middle of the screen is I see our checkout service. And what I see is for the last 60 minutes, There have been 6,000 errors related to the checkout service. Well, that's not good. We don't want errors in the checkout service. We want people to be able to check out successfully. And so what I want to do is start to dig into this and figure out what is causing these checkouts and how can I fix it. So what I'm going to do is click on this checkout panel. And when I do, I get opened up, and let me just refresh this data here. Taking a moment, there we go. What I get when I go into here is more panels, more dashboards, more information. And what I start to see in here are a variety of different things. So let's start to look at these. Now, in this example, two things I want to make you aware of. The first is this is a lab environment, a training environment, and so my data is replicating itself. And for this example, I want us to ignore the early portion of this graph, of each graph. So these graphs are showing the last 60 minutes. And remember, I said I'm in the United States. So currently in the United States where I am, it's about 8:45 p.m. to about 9:45 p.m. It's actually 9:45 right now. So for this chart or this graph, I want us to ignore the 8:45, 9 o'clock, even 9:15 time, because I want to focus on this end portion of all of these, the right, far right. This data replicates, and it's replicating in a time, it's just, we're kind of in the middle of its replication. So it's going to be a little weird, but we'll still be able to get through it. What I see here in this first chart is our bookings. I see for the last 60 minutes, once again, I'm going to ignore this far left portion. And so what I see over here at about 9:15 is I see a lot of successful bookings. I see the green representing success. People are booking, people are booking, people are booking. What I see at right about 9:40 or so, and the issue replicates at 45 after the hour, which is kind of why it's occurring right now, but that's okay, is I see a drop in successful bookings right here. At that same time, I start to see an increase in failed bookings, in failures, meaning people can't book, people can't check out. That's interesting. I'm going to refresh this again. Just like I said, the data is kind of generating right now, so we're in a weird time. But I start to see that here. So at about 9:40, I see a drop in successful bookings, and I see an increase in failed bookings. Okay. Now I'm going to go to this one, errors over the last 7 days. What this is showing me is for the last hour, how many errors I had today, how many errors I had 2 days ago, and how many errors I had 4 days ago. So for me, this is Wednesday night, Monday night, and Saturday night. And what I see here at about 9:30 or so is I see there are a few errors. There aren't 0 errors, but there are a small amount of errors. And what I see once again is about 9:40 or so, I see an increase in errors that occurred today, or actually just right now, within a moment or two ago. And what this is showing me is at this point, 2 days ago, there were no errors. I don't see a blue line. 4 days ago, there were no errors. I don't see a green line. But today there were errors. And so this is letting me know that this is kind of weird. Why am I getting errors today and I didn't get any yesterday or 2 days ago? Well, something must have happened. I have these errors by node, and we'll talk about nodes a little bit later. But what I see when I mouse over them is a source name. And if you notice, the source name is prod09, which is my environment for this example, travel-checkout. And so this is just once again showing me that there are errors associated with the checkout. And that's really what I'm starting to see here on the left-hand side of the screen, is that there's errors with the checkout that have occurred around 9:40 or so. I'm going to refresh this once again, because like I said, it's pre-populating as we're speaking. And I want to go to 2 more charts. The first one I want to go to is, if you remember the log message not the log message, but the Slack message I got said gateway response time outlier. And what it was referring to is this chart right here. What this chart is showing let me refresh just so we can get the latest and greatest. There we go. That's perfect. Is my gateway latency. Now, what is occurring here is the system is looking at the gateway latency that's occurring and starting to determine what is a normal amount of latency and what is not. Now, with gateways and more specifically with latency, there's always going to be some latency. I don't think it's physically possible to have a 0.000 latency. However, there's going to be a range where latency is good and latency is bad. If you have to wait half a second for a website, that might be okay. If you have to wait 5 seconds for a website, that still might be okay. 10 seconds might start to be a little bit long. 15 might be unacceptable. That value is going to change depending where you are. Infrastructure, as you guys know, sometimes it can take a little bit longer to get to a website based in your location versus where I am, where I'm literally next door to servers. And so that can impact your experience. What this is showing is the gateway latency that's occurring at a moment in time. And to read this, what we're going to look at is a moment in time. So right now I'm looking at 9:24 p.m. And what the system is telling me is the processing milliseconds for that moment in time was 401. So at that moment in time, the latency is about half a second or 0.4 seconds. The system is determining that a threshold, an acceptable range of latency, is between 401.32 and 401.70, which is quite a narrow range. The millisecond processing for this example is 401.47. And so that is within that range. And so that's considered good, acceptable, normal, whatever you want to kind of use to describe it. If I fast forward a little bit here to 9:36, the range, the threshold has changed a little bit, not by much, but a little bit. It's now 0.36 to 0.68. The actual is 401.51. And so that's still considered acceptable within the range. Now let's look at that time at 9:40 where things are starting to get a little bit weird. What we see here, and it's kind of hard to get the mouse out of the way, but what I see here is a spike and I see a pink triangle. And what the pink triangle is representing is an outlier, letting me know that this is abnormal. And when I put my mouse on that pink triangle, I see that abnormality. The threshold, that range is once again about 401.32 to 401.72 because the system's still expecting those kind of normal values. However, in this case, the processing milliseconds has spiked to 913, almost a full second. And so that's not good. That's weird. That's an anomaly. And so the system is letting us know that. And so that's what's occurring right here. Now, one more chart I want to show is the one at the very top of the screen, related to CPU and total memory. Now, once again, we're going to ignore the portion all the way to the left. And so if I look at, let's say about 920 or so, this is CPU and total memory. What I see are a variety of different metrics over here, but they're all relatively flat. This line is pretty flat. I mean, it's not completely, but it's pretty close to flat. And what I see at about 940 is a spike in CPU usage and total memory usage. So these are all things that I now have learned or understood from these dashboards. So what have I learned? Well, we're getting a drop in bookings and an increase in failed bookings at about 940. At about 940, we're also getting a bunch of errors. That's kind of abnormal. We're also having high latency with our gateway at about that time. And our CPU and total memory usage is kind of going high. Well, that's a lot of things to kind of go wrong. But we're starting to see those things, and that's what's important here. What we're going to do now is start to dig in and figure out why those things are going wrong. So let's go ahead and do so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this specific chart right here, the CPU and total memory. And so I'm going to click on the icon to view the chart. It's going to take a moment or two to load. And there, it loaded, not even that long. Once again, I'm going to ignore everything from the left of about 915 or 920. Now, what I see here in this portion that I'm just kind of mousing around in are these metrics related to CPU and total memory. And I see them going up, or going all over the place, but going up. Now, I'm doing something else in this this chart. Because right here with these CPUs and total memory, I'm looking at my metrics or utilizing my metrics. At the same time, what I'm doing at the very bottom of the screen is I'm utilizing my logs. And what I'm doing here is I'm saying, look for the logs associated with my checkout service. And within those logs, look for the word error or exception. There are errors in my logs. I know there's errors. And what I want to do here is I want to say, let me see those errors. The way I'm seeing these errors, or the way these errors are represented, is at the very top of the screen, right here. Now you'll notice this orange bar represents these errors. It's a 1 minute segment. Here there were 426 errors. Here there were 423, so on and so forth. Now what I want you to also notice is prior to 9:40, let's say 9:30, there are no errors. 9:35, no errors. 9:40 though, there are a whole lot of errors. And so I want to start to look at those logs and try and figure out what is causing those errors. Those errors just didn't happen magically. Something happened or didn't happen. And then as a result, we get all those errors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these 1 minute time periods where there's a lot of errors. It doesn't really matter which one. I just want to start to look at them. So I'll pick this one. What I've done is I've now brought the query, the checkout logs that have the word error exception into my log, I'm calling it log viewer, search capabilities, our log search. And now I see each log message. Remember, we're just looking at a 1 minute time period. So here's an error message, and here's the word error in it. You can see it right there. Here's another error message. Here's another one. Here's another one. And there's a lot of them. There's 426 of them just for a 1 minute period. Now, what I want to do here is I want to expand my search out. I don't want to look just for the errors. I want to look at a bigger time frame and a bigger scope. It's great that I see these errors, but it doesn't help me understand what caused the errors. At the point or time period I'm looking at, errors are already happening. So what I want to do is I want to do two things. The first is I want to modify my search and say, let me look at the last 60 minutes worth of data. Because over the last 60 minutes, things were working and then things were not working. And so what I should be able to capture is that transition from working to not working. And so that's why I want to get more time. The other thing I want to do with my search query up here is I want to remove this portion of text where I say, look for error exception, because I don't want to look just for errors. I want to look for everything. So I'm going to simply remove those two words or those two strings. And now I'm going to do a search. And what I'm now doing is I'm now looking at all my travel checkout logs from the last 60 minutes. And there's 26,000 log messages, 25 per page. Now, somewhere within these log messages is going to be an indication of what went wrong, and it's my job to find it. Now, I could look through all 27,000 log messages and try to find a unique log message. I really could look at page 1. Is there anything unique here? No. Page 2, anything unique here? Not really, no. And I could do that, but that would be silly. It would be a waste of time. It would be a waste of computing resources. It would be a waste of Sumo Logic. And so what I want to show is a feature that allows us to do something similar. What I'm going to do is use a feature that we call log reduce. When I click on the button for log reduce, it's going to take those 27,000 log messages and look through every single message and look for a pattern within each message, and then start to group all 27,000 log messages in those patterns. So it's doing it right now. I'm going to wait a moment because it's going to take a few seconds. It's looking through a lot of data. Probably another 10 seconds or so. Yeah, just about done. There we go. And so what it's done is it's taking those 27,000 log messages and look for patterns in them. And so we start to see some examples of these. So the first line here. This line represents a step in the checkout process. As we see here, some of the detail, we see things like a transaction ID, we see the checkout, we see a line number, we see a payment a portion or payment section. And so that's a step that's a part of the checkout process. Remember, we're looking at a 60-minute window where things were good and bad. So we're going to expect to see some good or normal stuff. And this first line is an example of just a normal checkout process, a good thing. Line 2, also an example of a good line because it has a transaction ID. And so as you do a checkout, the last step is going to be getting a transaction ID. And so that's considered a normal process of the checkout process. If I scroll down a little bit further, I start to see some errors. Here, there were 891 errors. I even see the error. It's an error, SSL routine, SSL3 gets server certificate verify failed. Down here, I see a different error. I see an error associated with the checkout process. Not very surprising. I'm expecting to see those errors, and this is confirmation I do. Now, what I want to do here is I'm looking for a unique log message. Even though I see 27,000 log messages, probably one thing happened or didn't happen, and as a result, we got all these errors. So what I'm looking for is, as say in the US at least, a needle in a haystack. I'm looking for a unique singular event that might be very difficult to find. So how am I going to find that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my count column here, and I'm just going to flip it around. Rather than looking at those things that have happened most frequently, show me those things that have happened less frequently. And so now I start to see these. Now, some of these are going to be specific to the checkout process. So for example, in this first log message, I see the process of booking a hotel, Holiday Inn, gives me the price and all that information. And that's just a normal good log message. It's unique though. What I'm looking for, I'm going to kind of scroll here a little bit to find it and show it to you. But the line I'm looking for, there it is, looks exactly like this on line 37. 37, this line is what has occurred. It's what has been gone wrong. So what has gone wrong? What we see here is Travel Logic app starting cluster, Prado 9 service checkout, meaning the Prado 9 cluster is starting and the service of checkout is starting as well. That's all good. What is the problem here is this line right there. Whoops, sorry. Version 1.14 dev. Well, remember earlier I mentioned that this is a production environment. Why was development code loaded into a production environment? Oh, somebody made a mistake and promoted the wrong version of code. Since they promoted development code in a production environment, it might have messed up the server certificates. It might have utilized more resources of the CPU and memory usage. It might spike the gateway, response time. And so that is the culprit here. This is the reveal. This is what went wrong. Somebody just very simply promoted the wrong version of code. Now, what I was trying to show in there is the demo as such, which consisted of 3 different parts. The first portion was the alerts. I got a Slack message. I might have gotten an email. I was able to go to that dashboard and look at those colors and very simply see green good, red bad. And you could imagine this dashboard in a command center or NOC environment and seeing those colors and knowing good or bad, very simple. I used the metrics in Sumo Logic to identify what was going on. What was going on was that CPU spike, that gateway latency, the checkouts being unsuccessful. And then I used the logs, and the logs helped me identify why it was happening. And why it was happening was due to that inappropriate code being promoted. And that's an example of using Sumo Logic. And of course, any questions, please go ahead and ask in the chat. All right, let's keep going. Now, this slide is important. What this is showing is Sumo Logic data flow. Now, I've mentioned these pieces already today, but now I'm going to add a little more context to them. And the first step is that data collection. As I mentioned earlier, your data is out there in the world. It might be in a laptop, it might be in a server, it might be in the cloud, it might be there in many other places. In order for Sumo Logic to help you with your data, the data needs to be collected and brought into Sumo Logic, and that's referred to as data collection. I'm not going to go too much deeper on it. I take that back. I do have one more slide that I'll go a little bit deeper, but that's about the high level. Data is collected and brought into Sumo Logic. Now, once it's collected and brought in, then step 2 can start to occur, which is searching and analyzing, starting to use the query language and use operators to slice and dice, if that term resonates, your data, so that you can start to you can start to go through your data and use the operators to create good queries. Use the charts to understand your data. Maybe looking at those raw log messages like I was showing earlier is helpful. Maybe looking at a pie chart or a graph is more helpful, and you can do that. And we'll go through examples of that quite soon. And then visualizing and monitoring is that next step. Not just being in Sumo Logic, but getting value from Sumo Logic. So getting an alert, getting an email, getting a Slack message, getting a Discord message, whatever mechanism you use, using the dashboard so that you can see things at a glance. And so you don't have to sit in Sumo Logic running a query every 5 minutes. The system can notify you, hey, this did not go properly, or this did. When we talk about alerts, we often talk about negative alerts. Something didn't work, something is producing errors, but of course can be used for more positive things. If you hit a sales goal or a certain criteria is met, but whatever you want to demonstrate and utilize, visualizing and monitoring your data is going to be a really powerful way to gain value of Sumo and somewhat, maybe ironically, actually stay out of Sumo. All right. Now, I do have another slide on data collection. This is a very busy slide. I don't want you to get too worried about it or worry about the details. But let me describe what this slide is trying to describe. At the very center of the screen, at the very top, we have the Sumo Logic Cloud. And so that is where all your data needs to get to. That's going to be the destination for it. Now, on the rest of this chart, what I'm showing is data that falls under 2 different categories. On the right-hand side of the screen, I am showing essentially cloud properties: AWS, Azure, GCP, Okta, Salesforce, etc. In that example, those environments might be generating your data, and you need to bring your data into Sumo Logic. And to do so, you would use what we call a hosted collector. Very simply, you would basically go into Sumo Logic, you would provide credentials for, let's say, AWS, and then we go and we grab the data on your behalf and bring it into Sumo Logic. It's not much more complex than that, but it's more secure than that. There's authentication, there's encryption, all that kind of stuff. But basically, we grab the data and bring it in for you. On the left-hand side of the screen, what I'm trying to show are, it always feels weird to say this, but older technologies at this point. Things that are existing behind a firewall that might be on bare metal devices in actual servers or server farms. And in those cases, you can actually install a collector, which is a lightweight agent, into those environments. Essentially, you would install this lightweight collector on a Windows device or Linux or whatever, and it would basically grab the data and send it over to Sumo Logic. Once again, more secure than that, there's encryption, but it's basically what it's doing. And the end result is the same. Your data is being brought into Sumo Logic. And that's really what I want to kind of drive that point across, is your data needs to end up in Sumo Logic. We're not going to go too much deeper on collection. We have a separate class for that, our administration class for it's actually just called administration, goes into the details of installing collectors and doing labs about it. And it's a very good class, just it's more in-depth than what we're going to cover right now. All right, a couple more slides. This This last slide is about metadata. Metadata itself is not a Sumo Logic thing. It's used in other areas. We did not invent it. What it is in a more global way is tags that get associated to data, hence metadata. In our world, what we do is going to be tags that are going to be associated to log messages. So when you collect the log messages and they're brought into Sumo Logic, these tags are going to be applied to your data. Some of these tags are going to be applied automatically, and some you or an administrator in your organization will have the ability to make up or decide what they are. The ones that are not bolded, the first couple, are some that get applied automatically. So the name of your collector, when your collector grabs all your data and brings it into Sumo, that name of that collector gets tied or gets associated or gets labeled to your data. And that metadata, that collector name, might be a very good way for you to locate your data. It also might not be a very good way for you to locate your data. Collectors, some customers have one collector. Some customers have two collectors. Some customers have 10 collectors. We have customers that have 10,000 collectors and more. And that's fine. It's just based on many things. But you might have a large amount of collectors, in which case your collector name might not be a very good way for you to locate your data. If there's a lot of them, 10,000 of them, there's going to be a lot of names and you might not know those names. And so what we came up to help with this situation is the metadata tag of source category. Source category, as it says right here, is freely configured. It's the main metadata tag. And an example of a source category is one I have right here. And we're going to use this source category a few times today, which is labs/Apache/access. Now, maybe you know Apache data, maybe you don't. We'll talk about it later. But what you do know or might know from this name that I'm using is some indication about the data that we're referencing. This is lab Apache access data. It's lab data. It's not production data. It's not development data. It's not QA data. It's not test data. It's lab data. It's in the name, labs. It's Apache data. It's not lab O365 data. It's not lab CloudTrail data. It's Apache data. And more specifically, it's Apache access data, which is a type of Apache data. And so this name is starting to give us that context for what the data is called and also how to locate it. So we can start to use these source categories when we do our query searches. And we're going to do that in just about a minute or two. All right, before we do, I'll see questions. I think we're pretty good. Yeah. So what I want to do is I want us to log into the system right now. I'm going to put these credentials in the chat. I'm also going to describe them. So we'll go through this together. So just have a moment of patience. What we're going to do is we're going to go to service.sumologic.com. Go ahead and go there. To do so, or to log in, we're going to need two pieces of information, an email and a password. The email that we're going to use is going to be training plus analyst number, and I want you to select a 3-digit number. So maybe you want to be training plus analyst 123 at sumologic.com. Maybe you want to be training plus analyst 124, training plus analyst 007, training plus analyst 648. Pick a 3-digit number at sumologic.com. And then the password is going to be fireworks ! So go ahead and log in. If you need help getting logged in, please let me know. Once you've logged in, if you can go ahead and put your 3-digit number that you're using, that will just help me know that you've logged in. So once again, service.sumologic.com, training plus analyst number at sumologic.com, and then password is going to be fireworks ! And a capital F. If you need help, of course, please let me know. Most likely it will probably be a typo if you can't log in, but please let me know. As you're starting to log in, feel free to poke around the system, if you will. We're going to go through some labs that are more structured, but if you're in the system already, that's fine. This account is giving you access to the training environment, and you'll have that access for really the rest of the month. So another about 2 weeks or so. And this training environment, as you'll see, has a lot of different sources of data. So feel free to use this after today. If you want to use it, well, we'll use it for tomorrow's classes, but for in the future, you can use these credentials. So hopefully you're able to log in. Haven't seen too many 3-digit numbers yet, but that's okay. I'll give everybody a few moments. I'm going to go ahead and log in myself. Let me log out of my other account here. I don't need that one. So I'm going to go to service.sumologic.com. Oh, let me log out of that one. There we go. And then I'm going to do training plus analyst 234. And the password I'm going to use is fireworks ! And so when I log in, I should see, well, you might see a screen like this. And remember, these are training accounts, so it's possible somebody else has used this account before. If you see a bunch of tabs, what I'd like you to do is go to the very top and close them, and close all of them. So ideally, you're on a screen that looks almost identical to this. So I'll just give everybody another few moments. I want to make sure we're all caught up. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a PDF into the chat that we're going to use as our lab guide for today. So let me go ahead and find that. Okay, so I just put that lab guide in the chat. So ideally, oops, sorry. Oh, wait. Yeah, I put the lab guide in the chat. And so ideally, you're now logged in and you have the lab guide. If anybody needs help, please let us know. But otherwise, I'm going to continue in just another moment or so. All right, so I'm going to continue. So I'm going to use my lab guide. I'm going to keep that over to my side. And I'm going to have Sumo Logic open because that's what I'm going to be using. And so we're going to start with lab 1. Now, before we get into lab 1, or as you're getting into lab 1, just to give you a brief tour of Sumo Logic. For some of you, this might be the very first time you've been in the system. Some of you may have been in here many times before. On the far left, there may be a black bar. It may be hidden, but I want to show it to you because we will be using it throughout the day. So this black bar, you can hide it, but it is going to be important. Before we get to the black bar, let's talk about the middle portion or the main portion of the screen. By default, once we close all those tabs, we get brought to the home page. Like any other home page, the idea is to get you up and running as quickly as possible. So you can start to look at things that you've recently run, recently opened. You can start to do those log searches and other things within Sumo Logic quickly. We have a Learn tab. This Learn tab is going to help you learn more about Sumo Logic. So there's videos, there's documentation, all good things within here. And then there's this certification. We're going to talk about certifications later, but this is where you'll take the certification exam. This is where you can access recordings and other very good material. So I'll show you this at the end of today, but this is where we'll go later. So if we're all together, let's go back home and let's start to use the lab guide. So the first thing we want to do in our lab guide is we want to view data. Sounds like a very good place to start. You now have access to a new system, a system you may have never seen before and may have no knowledge about. Well, seeing what data is in the system is a good place to start. And so let's do that. We should be logged in. And now we're going to look for data. Now, in this example, we're going to look for data in 2 different ways. Keep in mind that some of the things we're doing may not be possible in your real account. Your administrator can control what you can do. And so he or she can say, I want you to do this, or I don't want you to do this, or have access to this. So the first thing we're going to show, it's very possible you might not have in the real world, but it's important that you see. So what I want to show is the first way for you to look to see what data is available. And that first way is using this black bar. So we're going to make sure the black bar is visible, and we're going to go down to manage data. Once we go to manage data, we're going to go to collection. And when we go to collection, what we're going to see are all those collectors. Remember I mentioned there's all those different mechanisms grabbing data and bringing it into Sumo Logic? Well, for my training account, here are them. There's a lot of them. There's 19 pages of them. We have a lot of collectors. I'm just trying to clean this screen up a little bit. That's good enough. And so I start to see all these collectors. I see the name of the collector. I see, if I mouse over it, who created that collector. I see the health of it. That's going to be kind of important. Is my collector healthy or is it not? I see the type of collector. Remember I mentioned earlier hosted as well as installed. I don't know if I have an example. Oh, here's an installed. I start to see that description. I also see the source category. So for this set of data, here's the source category. For this set of data, here's the source category. And then I see some graphs that are populating or hopefully populating, showing me over the last hour how much data has arrived or how many messages, and a visual graphical representation. Now, what we can do in here is we can look for a specific type of data. So let's say if I want to see, is there any Okta data? Oh, yes, there is. Maybe I want to see, is there any CloudTrail data? Well, yes, there is. Now, that's one way for you to see what data is in the system. Once again, you might have access to this method, you may not. So what I want to show now is another way for you to get access to the data that's in the system. But this time we're going to do a query, a search query. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the top of the screen and we're going to go to plus new. When we go to plus new, we're going to select log search. These other options, they're great features of Sumo Logic, but we're not even going to look at any of them today. They're just much more in depth, and we could do a dozen other classes that go over these. So today we'll only be doing log searches. And so let's select the log search. When we select the log search, we are now on the log search screen. We have a query screen or section here that we can enter our query. We see the time range. By default, the query is going to be for the last 15 minutes. And what we can do here is we can enter a query. The query that we want you to enter is actually in the lab guide. I'm going to paste it in right now. What is this query doing? Well, this query is 2 lines. The pipe is representing a line break essentially, but this query is essentially doing 2 things. The first thing it's doing is it's looking for data. It's not looking for a specific type of data. It's looking for all the data. A wildcard represents everything. So we're saying, look for all the data that's been brought into Sumo Logic in the last 15 minutes. From that data, count by source category, meaning look at the source categories that are returned and then count by them. And when I click start, I should get exactly that. Here are my source categories. And here are how many of them, how many records match that. So what I see here is, for example, over the last 15 minutes, there's been 302 log messages of the lab's Artifactory request type source category. There's been 652 log messages from Zscaler, 2,100 log messages from Cloudflare, and so on and so forth. I get this aggregates tab, which is showing me the aggregation or the math of these log messages. Counting is a mathematical operator, and so I see those results right here. I can also take the count and just sort them. Maybe high to low or low to high. If I'm doing high to low, I can now see the largest amount of data being generated over the last 15 minutes was related to my Kubernetes banking demo. The second amount was also related to that Kubernetes demo. It's a beast. We get a lot of VMware data, a lot of Windows data, Linux data, so on and so forth. And if I look, not that you'd really see it, down over here on line 39 is my labs Apache Access data. Now I want to continue with this lab Apache Access example. And I haven't mentioned, well, I did mention, but Apache Access data, what is it? What it is web server data. So when you go to a website, you visit a website, a web page, it's a log message of your experience. Did you visit the page successfully? Did you not? What item on the page did you visit? Was it a graphic? Was it a image? Whatever it might be. What IP address did you come from? And we'll start to look at that data shortly. What I want to do in this example, or what the lab guide is telling me to do, is imagine I want to, or I know that I want to look at Apache Access data. I see it's here. Maybe my manager has told me it's important. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and see if somebody else in my organization has created data, has created a dashboard rather, utilizing Apache Access data. I see it's here. I know it's helpful, but maybe somebody has already created something for me that I can use. What I want to do here is I want to go to the black bar and I want to go to the library icon, this one on the far right. What the library represents are, or is, those items that somebody else has shared with you. Maybe an administrator, maybe just a peer, but somebody in the within your organization. In this case, what I'm looking for is a folder called Apache Access. Hopefully you see it. If you don't, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. But what I want to do here is I want to open this Apache Access folder, and I want to start to look at these dashboards, this Apache overview. This Apache overview was created by John Meredith, who's one of my peers. Maybe this dashboard is exactly what I need to understand about data related to Apache Access. Maybe it's not, but what it's showing me is what somebody else in my organization has created. And like I said, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not, but it's a good place to start. In this case, it's showing uptime, it's showing URLs that have been having errors, it's showing visitor location, and this all might be very helpful to me. Now, the next thing I want to show is what we call apps, and specifically our app catalog. Now, this dashboard that I have here is nice. Once again, it might be helpful, it might not be. Let's say it's not helpful. This idea of apps is going to allow me to utilize queries and dashboards that somebody at Sumo Logic has created and allow me to utilize them. So let's see how we do this, and we're going to do this together. We're going to go to the app catalog. And when we go to the app catalog, what we're going to see here are about 200 or so different properties, I guess you could say, that we can use based on what type of data do we have. For example, if we were using CloudTrail data, we could use the CloudTrail app. If we're using Kubernetes, there's a Kubernetes app. There's an app for, I mean, there's everything in here. Couchbase, Docker, Nucleon, Microsoft Office. Now, remember in this example, Apache is relevant. So what I want us to do is look for the icon or app, and we can type and search for it as well, called Apache. Not Apache Tomcat, that's something else. Not these global intelligence, that's something else. Just the app called Apache. And I'm going to click on it. What it's going to provide to me, this is not data yet, this is these are screenshots, but what it can do is provide me all this analysis of my data, basically taking my Apache data that I've ingested or collected and providing queries that somebody at Sumo Logic has created and overlay those. And so to set them up is really very simple. To set it up, we're going to just continue here and we're going to click Add Integration. And now we're going to specify what type of data we want to utilize. Actually, we're going to specify a few different things here. The first, and kind of going out of order, is the folder name. And so what I want you to do for your folder name is put your initials and or your number, 3-digit number you're using, just something sort of unique so that I can delete it easier later. And what we want to do here at the very top of the screen is mention or describe the source category. Now we can use, but actually, let me take that back. We can use a source category here, which is what I've been telling you, but we can also use other metadata. We could use the collector name. What we want to use here, really just as an example, is the web server underscore system equals Apache. So I want to copy that text and paste it right there. So what I should have ideally is the Apache app. The log source is going to be the custom data filter type. The custom data filter value is going to be web server underscore system equals Apache. And then the folder name is going to be your initials and some combination of Apache and some numbers. Once you have that all together, then you'll click next. At this point, the system is now referencing that data, referencing these queries, and putting the two together. And now it's done. Hopefully you see success. Now what I can do is go to my personal folder, and I should now see that folder that I just created. There may be more data in there. Once again, remember it's a training environment, so somebody else could have created folders. But now if I go to this folder, I can now view these various dashboards. So for example, Apache, I don't know, to pick one, Apache web server operations. I may know nothing about Apache data. I just know I have Apache data in the system, but the system is using the queries that somebody at Sumo has created and providing me a valuable output. Here I now see where my users are coming from, what bots they're using, or what OSs or what browsers, what clients they're using, other things like that, which is going to be really, really valuable to me. And so I get this insight, and I really didn't have to do much work to get it. So I want to stress the importance of apps. Anytime you ingest a new data source into Sumo, I'd encourage you to then apply the app to it. Is it always going to be exactly what you want from your data? No, not always, but most of the time it will be. And if it isn't, it will give you some insight into what's possible with your data. So the apps are really a good starting place. Highly encourage you to use them. The next thing we can do in here is we can now share this folder. So for example, I've created this app folder, this folder that now has all this valuable data and dashboards. Maybe I want to share it with somebody in my organization. I can go to the 3 dots there and choose to share. And maybe I want to share this with the entire organization. Maybe I want to share this just with my administrators. Maybe I want to share it with my administrator and my manager. And I can start to provide that detail. I can get a little more detail. Do I want them just to be able to view this dashboard, this folder? Do I want them to be able to edit it? Other values. And the other thing I can do is I can notify them by email. So I could say, hey, look at this new dashboard, and let them know, hey, this is something I think is important. I'm not going to share this because I just don't want to annoy my manager. So I'm just going to cancel out of here. All right, that should conclude lab 1. And just let me make sure. Yeah, so that should be all with lab 1. Let's go ahead. Let's see, what time is it? Let's do lab 2. We can do a little bit more, and then we'll take a break, probably after lab 2, maybe even lab 3. Sorry, excuse me. So in lab 2, what we want to now do is start to search for log data, get a little bit more involved with the query language. Once again, this is just an overview, just a touch of the surface. I could do 8 hours on query language. I could do more than that, but this is just the start. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to plus new, and we're going to go to log search. Now, the log search we want you to use is within the lab exercise. So I'm going to go ahead and grab it, copy it, and paste it in. Paste it in. Now, what this log search is going to do is it's going to look for the Apache access logs. It's not going to look for the lab O365 logs. It's not going to look for the production Apache logs. It's very specific. And we're going to look for the keyword of get, those three letters. We can adjust the time range. By default, it's the last 15 minutes. And so I'm just going to click search. And when I search, or when the search is done, I now get my results. I get results here in the form of a histogram. What's happening here is the system is looking at the last 60 minutes and showing me for that 60-minute window how many log messages fit within that, match that criteria. So from 10:16 to 10:17, there were 600 messages that matched the criteria. From 10:17 to 10:18, there were 623, and so on and so forth. I see the results. I showed this earlier, but this is the amount of results that match the criteria. And then down below in the bottom portion, I actually see the log messages. So here's log message 1, here's log message 2, 3, 4, and 31,000 more. I also see the keyword highlighted. This criteria, we're specifying we want the word get. If the word get is not in the log message, don't return it. And so we see that word highlighted. All right. So now we have our log messages. Now, within these log messages is going to be valuable information. I don't think I need to sell you on the importance of log messages. I feel like you know that log messages are important. And so what these log messages have is data or information for us. So let's look at one of these log messages. Now, the good thing about log messages, or most of the time, is that they follow a standard format. So Apache log message is going to be the same. All 31,000 of these log messages are going to follow the same format, the same pattern. And we can see that pattern just visually. Here, each log message starts with an IP address. Then it has a dash. Then it has another dash. Then it has a bracket. Then it has the time. The time is very specific. It's not just the time, it's the year, the month, the day, the hour, minute, second, plus UTC. Then we have the word get. Now, what we have after the word get is some more information. Right here, what we have is the element of the website that we were accessing. So when we went to our website, did we access a PDF? Did we access a cart via JSP? Was the PNG graphic loading? We start to see what was accessed. But we see more than that. We see this 3-digit number after the HTTP/1.1 quote. That portion is every log message, but this 3-digit number is unique, or not, it varies from log message to log message. This 3-digit number is a status code. You might not know what a status code is, but you probably do, and you don't even know it. When you go to a website and you unsuccessfully get there and you get a message like a file not found or page not found, what status code do you get? You get a 404. If you go to a website successfully, you get, or it's really more on the back end, but a status code of 200. And there's other status codes. There's a 500. There's a few others, but we have these different status codes. Now I'm showing you right here in this log message, there's the status code, there's the status code, there's the status code. And you can probably guess in this log message, there's the status code. What we want to do next is we want to parse our data. We want the system to recognize a status code. I know that the status code is right here, but I need to train the system to do that. And that's what I'm going to do with parsing. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to highlight a log message. It doesn't matter which one, because once again, they follow the same pattern. First one is a good place to start. I'm going to highlight from the quote in get through that status code, through this 4-digit number, which represents the size, and then through this next portion, which is a URL. So once again, any of the log messages, highlight through that URL. Once I've done that and have the portion highlighted that I want, I'm going to right click on the blue highlighted portion, and I'm going to choose to parse the selected text. And when I do, I'm going to get the screen I see right here. And what I'm going to do in this screen is I'm now going to take portions of the text and modify it and turn those into fields that can be parsed out. So for example, this portion right here, I'm going to highlight it and I'm going to click to extract this value. When I do, it turns into a star. And what I'm going to do down below is give that star, that field, a name. That field is a URL. And so I'm going to call it a URL. Next, I'm going to highlight this 3-digit number. Click to extract this value. I'm going to call it comma status code because that's what it is. Two more things to do here. I'm going to highlight this 4-digit number. This is the size. So when I went to visit that website, how many bytes were transferred back and forth, or really forth? I guess it's really one way. I'm going to call that size. Finally, I'm going to take this URL in here that's inside the quotes and highlight it. Click to extract the value. And I'm going to call that the referrer, meaning that's the website that somebody was coming from to get to our web page. What I should have here is now 4 stars up above and 4 fields down below. If I don't have the right number matching, the system will let me know. Since the numbers match, I can click submit. And when I do, what happens is that line is now put on the second line. And what is now going to happen is when I run this query, the system is going to look at this second line, look at this pattern, and see if it can match it. It's going to look at the first log message and say, can I find quote get? If I can, the next thing is going to be a URL. And so when I run this, I am now going to have these fields created for me. I'm running it. And now I have these fields created for me. And now I can start to use these fields. I can now say, how many status codes have we had over the last 60 minutes? How many unique status codes? How many status codes that were from Sumo Logic or from Greylock? And I can start to do that. And so that's what parsing allows me to do, is take my data, turn it into fields, and have the fields match values or pull the values from those fields. There are other ways to parse your data. There are many, many easier ways to parse your data. Many easier ways to parse your data. This is probably the hardest way to parse your data, but I did want to show it because it does give you an understanding of parsing. There's automatic parsing that you can do. Just we don't really cover that in this class. So this is almost a little more advanced than normal, but I think it's a good demonstration, and I hope you think so as well. So now what I have is my query, and I'm extracting fields from that query. And so at this point, we should have completed, we should be done with lab, really step 11 in lab 2. What we're going to do next is we're going to save the search. We've now created a query. We've created a search. It's not the most advanced search in the world, although actually I take that back. It is pretty advanced. It's parsing, it's doing keywords, and so we can save it. Saving it it's pretty straightforward. You click on the save icon, or you can go to the 3 dots and go to save as, and you can give it a name. Based on the name that you give it, it will save it. So I'm going to keep mine just the original name. Well, actually, I'll call it Apache status search. And when I save it, I should now see it. If I go to my personal folder, I should now see that search, that query that I just created. All right, let's see, anything else in lab 3? All right, that finishes lab 3. Let me just see. Let's do lab 3. We'll do lab 3 and then we'll take a break. Once we come back after lab 3, we'll be going pretty quickly. So let's finish up with lab 3. If everybody can hold out for another few minutes, I think, yeah, I think that's a better use of time. So in lab 3, what we want to do is we want to chart our data. We're going to take the query that we've been working with and continue. So right now I have, like I mentioned, my query. And what I want to do next is I want to look at the status codes. I want to count the status codes. The way I'm going to use, or the query syntax I'm going to use to count the status codes is very simply count by status code. It's not that crazy. It's pretty straightforward. Very similar to SQL. You may notice if you've ever used SQL, our query language is very similar. Not that count by status code is a query thing, a SQL thing, but just a good point to mention it. So let's go ahead and let me run this. Sorry, I was just reading something. So I'm going to go ahead and click search. Now, when I click search here, we get this new tab of aggregates. I think I mentioned that earlier, which is showing us the math here. I still have my original log messages with all the status codes, but what I'm doing with the aggregates tab is saying count by status code. So show me each unique status code and how many of them there are over the last 60 minutes. And I can do the last 15 minutes. I can do the next 3 days. It doesn't really matter. But what I can also do here is I can use a time slice operator. Now, in this example here, when I'm looking at these values, remember, this is over the last 60 minutes. So it's over a 60-minute window. Essentially, it's from 9:45 p.m. to 10:45 p.m. US based. What if I want to look at my data in a more granular method or way? I want to look at each minute. How many status codes did I have from this minute to the next minute? How many did I have from 10:30 to 10:31? Did I have more status codes from 10:31 to 10:32? I want to start to do that. And so what I'm going to do is utilize an operator called time slice. I'm going to go to my line 3 here, and I'm going to do a shift enter to do a new line. And above that now 4th line, I'm going to paste that 3rd line. In this case, I'm going to do a time slice of 1 minute, meaning I'm looking at a 60-minute window, and I'm looking at time slices of 1 minute. So those should be about 60 time slices. I could look at a 5-minute time slice. Rather than looking at a 1 minute period, look at 5 minutes, 10:20 to 10:25, 10:25 to 10:30, so on and so forth. And in order to use the time slices, I need to specify count by underscore time slice, comma status code. Once I run this, I am now going to be looking at 2 different pieces of data, or 2 dimensions, if you will. I'm going to be looking at, let me just get rid of that typo, the time slices and the status code. So let's see what I see and what you see. What I see is data, but it's a bit messy. So for example, on this first line, what I'm seeing here is from 10:31 to 10:32, because it's a 1 minute time slice, there were 432 200 status codes. From 10:10 to 10:11, there were 21 302s. From 10:22 to 10:23, there were 394 200s, and so on and so forth. This data is helpful, but it's not really organized. It's kind of messy, if you will. It's just random times and random status codes. And what I want to do now is I want to start to clean this up and make this a little bit more presentable. What I'm going to do so is I'm going to use what we call the transpose operator. And what this operator allows you to do is take your data in this way, where it has multiple dimensions of data, and look at the data and present it back in almost an Excel spreadsheet feel, where you have rows and you have columns, and then you have the intersection, which represents the value. And so let's take a look at how it works. It's very simple. It's very complicated, but it's also quite a simple query, in that we're going to say transpose. Our rows are going to be our time slices, and our columns are going to be our status codes. And now when I run this, what I have is what I asked for. I have on the left-hand side of the screen going down, I have my times, these 1 minute time periods. Across the top, I have the various status codes. And now I can start to see, for example, my 404s. First, they were 25, then they went down to 22, then they went up to 25, then they went down to 21. I'm starting to see that information. Now, this might be an acceptable way to see this data. This is a very nice way to present the data, but maybe a better way would be to utilize one of the charts. By default, you're put into this tabular or table view, but we can look at this data in other methods. Do we want to use a bar chart to express this data? Maybe, maybe not. Do we want to use a line chart? Do we want to use a column chart? Do we want to use a pie chart? Well, no, the line chart is pretty good. Maybe the column chart you want to use. Pick either one. I know we say to use the column chart, but for this example, either one is fine. All right, hopefully we're still together. A little bit more here, and then we'll just be about done with this lab. And the little bit more that we want to look at is this chart right now. If you notice my values here, actually, if I go back, no, actually I can do it with the chart, sorry. What I notice here is I see my values. I see these 200s. I see that they go up and they go down. I see this blue line pretty clearly. Here it's high, here it's lower, 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 higher, lower, etc. I see this purple line representing the 304s. I see it goes up and goes down. A little harder to see because there's less of them due to scale, but I can see it goes up and down. But you know what? These other values, these 404s, these 403s, I can't really make out whether they're going up or down. I just can't see them. Very simply, I can't see them. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to modify my chart, and I can do this in two different ways. We wanted to show both ways because I thought it was helpful. The first thing you can do is very simply go to the chart and say, don't show me the 200s. Don't show me the 304s, click on them and turn them off. And as a result, now these other values I can see better. I can see this yellow line is spiking up or going down because due to scale, it's just adjusted more properly. Now, that being said, there's another way to approach this, and that's using a where statement. And this is straight out of SQL. What I can do is I can apply a where statement to my query on this third line. On the second line, I'm saying determine what the status code is, as well as what the URL is and other stuff. On this line, what I'm saying is if the status code equals 200 or 304, do not include it in the results. That's what the exclamation point is. It's acting as a not. And so now when I run this query, you notice I haven't run it yet. When I run it, the 200s and the 304s are going to disappear, because I'm saying don't even include those in the results. So we wanted to show you this as two different ways to do kind of the same thing. Do you want to hide the results via the legend, or do you want to exclude them from the actual query? And depending on the use case, there you could make a case that both are good and helpful. All right, so that's going to conclude lab 3. We're going to take a break now. Let's do a 9-minute break. That'll bring us back at yeah, we'll do that. So we'll do a 9-minute break. Go ahead and get up, grab a drink, a beverage, a snack, whatever you'd like to do, and then we'll come back. I'm going to put myself on mute. I assume Suresh will probably go away for break as well. And so then we'll come back. But if there's questions, put them in the chat. And when we get back, we'll go ahead and answer them. So we'll see everybody in about 8 minutes or so. And then we'll have a little bit more to do, probably about another half hour of labs, maybe not even that long. And then we'll take that exam. So thank you, everybody, and talk to you all in a few moments. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you had a good break or a little break, got a little snack, what have you. Before we continue, or we are going to continue, but the question came in the chat or the Q&A, good question. There's been a lot of good questions. The question was regarding this line right here. Does it matter where we put it in the query? Very good question. So can I put it anywhere I want? The answer is no, but let me elaborate, of course. In these first two lines, the system is still, really specifically with the second line, the system does not know what a status code is yet. So I could not put this line at the very top because it doesn't know what a status code is. I can't start saying don't include or exclude. I need to at least wait until it knows what one is. However, after that point, it can go, they can go anywhere you want, really. But there's value in placing it where I did. Let's see, when did that work? The reason I want to put it here specifically is I want to get my results back. So I'm looking through all my access data and I want to get my status codes and those things like that. And what I want to do here is I want to limit the data I return. I don't want to bring back more data than I need. Why take all the status codes and look at them through the time slice if I don't need to look at all of them? Rather exclude them here. And so, yeah, so future conditions can work on lesser data. Very good way of putting it. Exactly that. And that is very SQL-esque. And so it does matter. And you'll just kind of learn that as well. So great question. Cover in much more detail in search mastery. Actually, let me a quick tangent. I have a slide we can actually go through with this. Let's see. Let's do it. And probably should have done this first, but nevertheless, here's an example of a query very similar to the one we've been using and we still need to finish up with. But what we show here is the idea that they build on top of each other. Pipes are used to separate them. And exactly that of taking a large set of data and then filtering it down. Actually, yeah, exactly as said, one step at a time to what you want. I mean, a better illustration is exactly this of a filter. You start shoving all the stuff you have and you only want the good results to come out. And that's basically what's occurring here. So we start with the metadata, those keywords. Sorry. Then we parse. As I mentioned, many ways to parse. We just showed you one and really the most complex way, but you can parse your data. Then you want to filter your data, or maybe you don't, but you certainly can. And this might be where you say include this or don't include that. Now, once you've limited that data set using those filters, now you can start to aggregate it, counting the most common aggregator, sum, average, as well as many others. And then you can start to format your data. We haven't played with this yet. Actually, we did. Transposing is a formatting where we could say only show us the top X. If we're looking at a bunch of IP addresses, we might want to see all of them, or maybe we'll just want to see the top 10 or the top 5, and we can specify that within the query. So great question. Yeah, something I should have really discussed earlier. So very appropriate to ask. So thank you. All right, let's go ahead and continue. So we're going to get back to our query that we have hopefully still open and use our lab guide. And so we're going to be on or using doing lab 4 right now. So at this point, we now have our query and we have a chart of some fashion. What we want to do now is add this to a dashboard. How do we add it to a dashboard? Well, there's a big button here that says add to dashboard. You click on it. It's really that easy. When I click to the add to dashboard, I need to do a couple things. The first thing is I need to give this dashboard panel a name. Very similar to the idea of creating, when we save the query, giving it a name, same idea. This is going to show up in a dashboard format. It's going to be a chart. We probably want to give the chart a name. The name I'm using here is fine. I probably want to be more specific in the real world, but for right now, it's good. Now, for the dashboard, I want to create a new one. we can use existing dashboards, but that's not really the exercise. So what I want you to do is create a new name. I encourage you to use your initials and the 3-digit number or something like that. Doesn't really matter too much. I'm going to use just a bunch of numbers because I think I have a few, different dashboards. And then what I want to do is click on this option to create new dashboard with my dashboard name. When I click on it, I want to turn off this option here. This option says create in dashboard new UI. New UI, new is greatest, best, always new, new, new. In this case, specifically with this example, the new dashboard doesn't work. And so we want to just use the old dashboard. Basically the same thing, but just in this case, we want to use the old one, or classic, I guess you could say. So go ahead and make sure you turn that option off. Once you've done that, then you can go ahead and click add. And what should happen is you now get this screen showing you your dashboard and showing you the panel. And so what we just did in that last step, we added a dashboard, but technically we added a panel to a dashboard. So just to clarify, because we can then continue to add more dashboards to this panel, more panels to this dashboard if we wanted to. Now, while we're in here, we can modify this for some look and feel. We can go to this option here, and it might be a touch different than what it shows on your lab guide. But if we go to the 3 dots, we can go to add panel, and we can choose a text panel. And what we can do with this text panel is add some text that will help somebody that's viewing this chart understand it. So maybe Apache data, this chart does not include 200 or 304, something like that. And now I can go ahead and modify just simply the look and feel of this chart by dragging and dropping. So maybe I want to put my notes on the left. Maybe I want to put my chart on the right. Maybe I want to make my chart bigger. One of the most, I think, important settings is under more actions is the toggle theme, which allows you to bring it to a dark theme, which is way easier on the eyes. And then, maybe I want this, back over here. And all right, that's the way I want to present my data. Once I'm done editing, well, very simply click done editing. And what I can do now is I can now share this. And now I can click this icon here, the share icon or export icon, but for us it's share. And now, like I did earlier, maybe I want to share this with my manager. And I want to share it with, whoever, Akesh as well. I can start to do that. All right, let's see, anything else in this lab? I think that concludes lab 4. Yeah. All right. So what we're going to do is go to lab 5, which is going to discuss modifying a dashboard. For this example, we're going to go back into the Apache one we used earlier, or created earlier, excuse me. So what I want to do is I want to go to my personal folder, and I want to go to the Apache folder that I created. And within that Apache folder, I want to open the Apache overview dashboard. Okay. So in here, we have this dashboard. This, remember, was generated from the app. And so these are queries and dashboards that somebody at Sumo's created. We think they're helpful, but maybe they're not. Or maybe they can be more helpful. And let's use the example right now. Now, the example we're going to use is a little US-centric. I apologize for that, but well, you can modify the query as you want. But what we're going to do is we're going to use this example here of visitor locations. We have this visitor location of worldwide visitor information over the last 60 minutes. This is where people have logged in, or computer services, I guess you can't really say people anymore, but have logged in from around the world. Very interesting data. We can zoom in here and we can start to get more specifics. If we're looking at the US, we can start to see where in the US, so on and so forth. Now, like I said, I am being a bit US-centric here. And as I might tend to do. What if I just want to look at US data? In my case, I am managing the US. I hate to say it, I don't care about the rest of the world. I don't need to look at Asia data or India data or whatever it might be. I just want to look at US data. How can I do that? Well, let's go ahead and do it right now. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and open the search. For all of these panels, I have this ability. I actually have two abilities or two options. I can open and search, or I can edit. They're basically the same idea. What they allow us to do is see the underlying query. So how was this map created? Well, here's the query, how to do it. It looks complex. It's not. It's really quite simple. We go over in our search mastery class. Technically, I can create this query in 3 lines, but it's quite a powerful query in that it's showing us worldwide information. Now, once again, in this exercise being US centric, what I want to do is I want to modify this query. And the way I want to modify this query is specifying the United States. And what I can do is I can do that down here. Now, where I do this is important because, as discussed earlier, and I don't want to get too deep into this query. Well, maybe I do. Let's see how much time. Yeah, I can go a little deep into it. Here is the query. What's occurring here is we're using a lookup table. What we're doing is we're taking every IP address that shows up in our Apache data. IP address is very easy to find. It's in the log message. And we're taking the IP address and we're looking at our geolocation data. We have a database of geographic information. It's actually housed by a company called Newstar. I don't want to get into that too much. It's a good thing, but it's digressing a bit. And so we have this database of all these geographic location. And what we're able to do is pull from that database. So we can take an IP and we can find out where in the world it was, what latitude it had, what longitude it had, what country name it had, and so on and so forth. Now, since we're utilizing these fields, or these fields are being parsed out for us, we can now use them to filter on specific information. We can go ahead and say, excuse me, show me where country name equals United States. Now, when I click start, the query is going to run. It's going to grab all that geographic information but it's going to now filter on just the United States. Conversely, I could do that, although that's not the right place for the exclamation point. Yeah, that's not the right. But I could go ahead and create a where statement where I exclude a specific country as well and show worldwide information, but not the US. Now, once I've made this modification, of course, I can see it here. But what I want to do here, because let's say this is my part of relevant to my role, is I can now update the dashboard. And I can now choose to say, it's updating right now, show me just that US based. Oh, thank you for adding the country name. That should work. Let's see if it does. So somebody put in the chat of where country name. Let's see. Oh, well. All right, I'll play with it later. But you get the idea. Although that's, yeah, I don't want to play with it too much. But that's what we're able to do there. And so we want to show this for two reasons. One, so that you can do that and change the chart in that way. But also so that you can take a look at any of these queries here, find one that you might think is interesting, and leverage it. So for example, this one, just this one, not just this one, not ignoring the top one. Top 10 URLs with 4xx or 400 errors. Well, if I wanted to, I could very simply change that to 500 errors and now update that query, save it, and now modify that dashboard to show 500 errors. And I didn't really have to know or learn the query language. I can modify a nice, just kind of small portion of it. The other thing I want to show in here, I think, really just the visual settings, is that ability. So when I want to show my data, do I want to show it in a chart? What type of chart? Maybe a honeycomb makes more sense. Probably not right here, but I could do that. And so with these dashboards, particularly the new dashboards that are being shown here, that gives you more control over your just the visual output, and also the visual standardization, in that you have access to the JSON for this chart. So you can actually edit this JSON within Sumo or independently and start to create some consistency around your material that might be outside the realm of just Sumo Logic dashboard design. So you can really get quite creative with the access to the JSON here. And once again, something we just cover in more detail in other classes. But as you can see here, you can directly through the JSON, you can start to modify those font sizes and all that stuff. All right, let's see, anything else in there to show? No. So let's go to, what are we up to? We're up to lab 6. In lab 6, what we're going to do is create an alert. Now, the way we're going to create an alert, I'm going to give a little caveat here, a little, not warning necessarily, but the alert we're going to create is different than the alert you might expect. What we're going to show you first with the lab 6 is setting up an alert. And what we mean by an alert in this example is a query that runs periodically and sends you the results of that query. So that's one alert as we're defining it in this lab. And so let's look at this as an example. So for example, going back to our Apache overview dashboard, maybe more specifically the visitor location one. And if you notice, when I went to open a log search, then I'm brought into the more traditional log search screen. Pretty similar. You can do pretty much both, anything you need from either one, but it is just a little bit different. But what I want to do in here is I want to go ahead and save it, as I showed you earlier. But when we go to save as, we have another option. The option we have down here, and I didn't show this earlier, is this option to schedule this search. So right now we have this query that's going to generate this data, this geographic data for us. What we can do is we can choose to schedule this search. And by doing so, we can have this query run periodically, maybe every 15 minutes, maybe every 12 hours, maybe weekly, whatever. And what's going to happen is this query is going to run. And when it runs every 6 hours, it's going to send an email to whoever I designate. So maybe I want to send it to myself. I'm just typing it's our full domain should be used. Maybe I want to send it to my manager. And so what happens is, like I mentioned, every time this query runs, if there's results, I can actually decide that. Do I want to get it every time a search is complete or not? But assuming there's results, I then get that list. So every 6 hours, I would get a list of the geographic information, essentially. And we're calling that an alert. Now, in my mind, that's not really an alert. It's a scheduled email, which is very helpful and very important and should be used, but it's not a true alert. What I want to show very quickly, and it's not in the lab guide, is more traditional alert and how to do so, because it's something I think you'll want to do. So what we're going to do here, and for this, like I said, I don't have a lab guide. I'm really just going to show you, walk you through, is I'm going to go to manage data, and I'm going to go to monitoring. Now, it's possible in the real world you don't have access to this. An administrator could remove access. I don't really know why they, well, I know why they would. There's a very good reason, but it is possible. But at least now you know what to ask for. What I have in here are a bunch of alerts that I've set up, or monitors that I've set up. But let me show you how to set up a new one, and I think that will illustrate why this is good and why I'm recommending it. What it allows me to do is take a query and paste it in here. I'll just I'll just put a very simple query in here. Once I put that query in here, it now allows me to see the values that are existing for that query. And it allows me to create a trigger, both in a critical and a warning. And so what I could do is I could say, maybe in this case, I'm looking at these logs. And you know what? If I have more than 4,000 log messages in 5 minutes. I want to know that. That's warning. There's a lot of messages. But you know what? If I have 6,000, excuse me, that's going to be a critical. That's, a lot of data, too much data. Warning, warning. And what I can do is I can now start to decide, who do I want to get notified? What notification method do I want to use? Do I want to use a Slack message like I showed you earlier? Do I just want to send an email, what is more traditionally done? I can decide for the critical, do I want to send it to one group or a warning to another group? And so I have that functionality. The last thing I'm going to show you in here is this up here, which is the detection method. I have the ability to set static values. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking at my data. I'm seeing, there's about 2,500 log messages coming in. If I hit 4,000, I want to make that a warning. And if I hit 6,000, that's critical. And I'm using those as very static numbers. And that's why it's called static detection. But with the outlier, I can start to say, and I don't want to get too deep into the outlier. Which one? It doesn't really matter. But I can start to say, if you see something that's outside the standard deviation, let me know. And so we can go ahead and start to do things like that, where the system can calculate and say, hey, this is abnormal, rather than just a hard or static number. So outlier is not really the nicest way to show it right here. Outlier deserves its own time, and it's shown quite heavily in the search mastery class, but did want to mention it here and just mention this new monitor section as really the better way to set up alerts. So cool. All right, that's going to just about finish things up. Let me see where we are. Any integration with MS Teams, like with Slack. So we allow you to use webhooks, which should integrate with, let me see if I have access here. Should allow you to integrate with MS Teams. So I think that's done through webhooks as well. All right, let's see, with the lab guide. Let's see, where are we at? Lab 7. So Lab 7 is a reminder of the ways to get help through Sumo Logic. And a lot of this we kind of looked at already. I'm not going to really go through it specifically. Yeah, well, I guess let's do a quick overview, because I do want you to know where to get help from. So once again, Learn gives you the ability to look at our documentation. Our documentation is very good. I say that as coming from a company actually called Google, where documentation was not very good. So we are quite proud of our documentation, and we encourage you to use it. And I'm going to show you shortly how good it is, going to kind of let you prove it to yourself that we have good documentation. What else besides documentation? That's really kind of the gist. So let's see, I'm going to see if we have any questions. I think Suresh has been pretty good on answering them. So I think he's really been on top of it. So I think we're pretty good on questions. What I wanted to do now is I want to start to discuss the certification exam. I don't want you to get too worried, but let's discuss what's about to take place here. Now, for this exam, it's important that you log in and take the exam as yourself. We don't want to use the training credentials that we were using today, because I don't want training analyst 347 getting credit for the exam. I want you as an individual to get credit for the exam. So what we want you to do is now log out of the training environment by going to the bottom left of the black bar, going to the name, training analyst number, clicking on it and signing out. And what I'd like you to do now is log into your Sumo Logic account. Everybody on this call should have a Sumo Logic account, most likely through your employer. You might have password credentials for it. You might have access through like an Okta or a One Login. But regardless, we want you to get into that account. So I'll give you a moment to do so. And while you're doing so, I'll log into a similar account to show you the process that we're going to be doing. So I have my All right, so hopefully you should be able to log into account. So if you don't have an account, so we're getting a few of these. So what what you can do is you can create, you can sign up for one. So let me show you that. Usually I don't show this, but let me, where is it? sumologic.com/sign up, I believe it is. Sign dash up. So let me put this link in the chat. And what this allows you to do is sign up for a Sumo Logic account for free. There's no credit card information taken or anything like that. It's kind of pretty straightforward. And so you're welcome to do that as well. So when you do so, you'll specify a business email. I don't think we allow Gmail anymore. We kind of flip-flop and back and forth on that. So hopefully you can use a business email account. And then you would just specify your region. And there should be a India or Mumbai rather. And then you would sign up. So go ahead and start to do that. For everybody else, hopefully you're logging into your account, and assuming you are, let's go ahead and continue where we want to go. So once we log into our own account, we should be on the home page. What we want to do is we want to go to certification. So we're going to click on the certification tab and on the Get Certified option. And when we do, if we did it correctly, we should be brought into our Learn portal, or training Learn portal, I guess is what we call it. I'll go through these steps a few times, so if you're just catching up, it's fine. Once again, for the home certification, Get Certified, then you'll be brought here. Now, what we have in here is a few different things. Under recorded live training, we have exactly what it sounds like, recorded live training. So if you want to go through any of our classes, in here we have, for each class, we have a recording, we have the lab guide, and then we have also slides in there. That's accessible to you at any time, not just for today, anytime using your Sumo account. But what we want to do today is we want to go to Get Certified. When we go to Get Certified, we see all the exams that are available. And there's about, well, we have multiple language. There's about 20 of them right now, about 10 courses. And so what we're going to do is we're going to select the exam that we want to take, which is Fundamentals. And so we're going to click on Fundamentals. Everyone here is, I believe, English speaking. We do have a Japanese version. We have Spanish, but I don't think that's appropriate for this audience. So Fundamentals exam is what we're going to take. Now, this exam is free for you, free for your organization, no fees or anything. Which is great because many organizations do charge for testing. When you finish this exam, you're going to earn a certificate, which is something you can display proudly. And we encourage you to take that certificate and put it on your LinkedIn, and you've now learned a new skill. You've now learned you've been a Sumo Logic fundamentals learner. That's valuable in the marketplace. And so you're going to walk away here with a certificate. But how do you earn that certificate? What you're going to do is you're going to register for free. You're going to click Start. And it's going to give you the guidelines. Now let's go through these guidelines because they're quite important. The first one is it's an exam of 30 questions and you have 60 minutes to take it. Might not sound like a lot of time. You'll have plenty of time. I don't want to say I promise that, but you won't need all 60 minutes. Now, an important thing here is this is an open book exam. It's an open Google exam. It's an open Sumo Logic exam. It's an open Sumo Logic documentation exam. For this exam, I want you to use the Sumo Logic documentation. I want you to rely on it because I want you to show you that it works, that it has good stuff in there for you. Of course, if you don't want to use the resources, you don't have to, but nobody is, not that it's an honor system, it's up to you. The resources are available to you, and I would encourage you to use them. So using the Sumo Logic documentation will get you through the exam. And intentionally so. Once again, we're trying to show you the value of the documentation in there. The exam is going to consist of different types of questions, mostly multiple choice, but there are some matching, some fill in the blanks. And you need 75 to pass it. Now, once you get to this screen, you're going to click next. And at that point, the timer is going to start. Actually, no, I take that back. When you click start next, then you're going to get to this screen. Once you click start assessment, then the clock will start. Now, one more thing I want to show, and then I'll let you take the exam. So you're going to start the assessment and you're going to take the exam. Once you're done with the exam, you're going to click next. And when you click next, you're going to get your score. Your score is going to be better than mine, hopefully, but you'll get your score. It's important that when you get your score, you click submit, because if you don't click submit, the system does not record the score until you do. It's not a good system. It's not our system. It's the testing system we use, but it's one of the kind of quirks in it. So you do have to click submit on that final screen. Once you do, though, you will get a certificate. And so I don't really can't show it to you because I didn't pass it, but you will get a certificate. And so we encourage you, like I said, to utilize that certificate and promote yourself, promote Sumo, and gain a valuable skill. So thank you for attending. I'll probably go over these steps again, but if you want to start the exam right now, you're welcome to. Thank you for attending. We encourage you to take the exam right now. Of course, life gets in the way. And so, if you can't, you can take it at any time, but now is when, when you've allocated time, on your schedule to take it. Tomorrow, we're going to have some good classes for you. So today was fundamentals, which is the basics of Sumo Logic. Tomorrow, we're going to get pretty advanced. Pretty advanced. We're going to have two classes for you. The first one we're going to have tomorrow is what we call cloud security monitoring and analytics. What it is simply is the query language class with security related queries. So we're going to learn about the query language itself. We're going to be doing a lot of log searches, some that start with a similar framework as what we did, some that get more advanced, and with the security kind of mindset. And then the class we're going to have for you in the afternoon is called Cloud SIM Fundamentals, which is going to show our Cloud SIM product, which is different, and which I think you'll really like. It's kind of a cool product on its own, and there'll be a lot of labs. Question about the exam just came in about attempts. You have as many attempts as you need. It may say that you only get one attempt, but that's incorrect. Somewhere in one of the documents it does, but you have as many attempts as you'd like. So yeah, that's important to know. So good question. All right, so I'm going to run through the steps one more time, and then I'm probably going to throw myself on mute and probably just disconnect because it's starting to get late here. But let me just show one more time just to make sure everybody's together. So once again, hopefully you logged in. If you had to sign up for an account, that's fine. Hopefully you ultimately got into Sumo Logic really one way or another. Once you do, go to certification and select Get Certified. Once you do that, then we're going to choose to get certified. And we're going to choose the fundamentals exam. These other exams are available to you. We'll take some of these tomorrow. This one we'll take tomorrow. But today is fundamentals exam. Either you might click start here or resume. Just since I already did start here, it's kind of done this step for me. And then you're going to do start assessment. As a reminder, open book, use those resources. And as Suresh mentioned in the chat, really encourage you to do the certification today. We're here, you're here. Yeah, do it. Cool. All right, I'm going to go ahead and conclude for today. So I'll leave. Let's see how we'll do this. I'll disconnect. I'll leave the channel open. Suresh will manage. Although if there's anything that comes up, let him know. But I expect you guys will be kind of quiet taking the exam. Once you're done with the exam, of course, please disconnect. And then we'll see you tomorrow. I'm looking forward to tomorrow where we'll do the double session. So thank you everybody for attending. Thank you for really good questions. And we'll see everybody tomorrow morning.